Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to the Jewish People's Podcast by JPPI. On Monday, an 88-year-old Jewish woman was attacked in France. She was attacked after she was seen wearing a Star of David necklace. And it turned out that this woman was the grandmother of Israeli member of Knesset, Sharren Haskel. Anti-Semitism has been surging across France. Since October 7th, there's been a rise of over 70% in reported anti-Semitic incidents. And many Jews are wondering what their future looks like there, especially after the first round of the parliamentary elections, which saw the right-wing National Rally Party of Marine Le Pen rise, alongside a bloc on the left, including the far-left LFI coming in second place. The situation is so dire that Rabbi Moshe Sabag, the rabbi of the Grand Synagogue in Paris, called on any Jew who has the opportunity, especially those who are young, to make Aliyah to Israel. To discuss this situation, and very worrisome situation, I'm joined by two people today. Robert Ejnes, Executive Director of the CRIF, the umbrella of Jewish NGOs and institutions across France, as well as with JPPI Senior Fellow Dov Maimon, who's been writing and speaking extensively about the future of French Jewry. Let's begin. Robert Ejnes, the Executive Director of the CRIF, which is the umbrella organization of French Jewish institutions. I want to thank you very much for joining us here at JPPI. And I was thinking, obviously there's a lot going on, right? In France, you've had one round of elections, you have another round of elections. We're talking on a day when there was another.
We had European elections, then we had local elections. So this will be on Sunday, our third round of elections.
Your third round, right? Your third round of you guys are voting. You're almost like Israeli when you think about it.
Right.
You're voting as much as we do. But all jokes aside, also today was a serious anti-Semitic incident yesterday or the day before, where a 88-year-old woman who turns out to have been the grandmother of the Knesset member Sharren Haskel was beaten. So, try to give us some order, because we're hearing a lot. French Jews need to leave. French Jews are no longer safe. The far left, the far right. There seems to be so many different forces pulling in so many different directions. What's it like now? As a Jewish leader in France?
Okay, first of all, as a Jewish leader, we've been in this country 2,000 years. So this gives roots into the country. And this is important. Last Sunday, there was an event by the Consistoire for the Rashi Day. To remember people that Rashi was born in France at 130 kilometers out of Paris. And it's very important because the French, and you remark it in Israel, French Jews remain French for very long. Even though they become Israelis, but they have French culture, French habits, French accents. And it's very important that we are very attracted both by our Jewish identity, but also by our French identity. We identify very strongly with France. So what's happening today, and this is a difficult question because any Jewish leader asks himself every day whether he should tell his fellow Jews to stay or leave. And our position at CRIF and most Jewish leaders today is Jews should be able to live everywhere they wish to. And this is what we work for. We work for the Jews to live in security in France, and we want the Jews who want to make Aliyah for the good reasons, and the Jews who want to leave for other countries to leave for good reasons. No Jews should be going out of the country for security reasons, for anti-Semitism reason, even though there is, of course, anti-Semitism in France today, and we'll come back to it. Let me tell you a story that happened to me many years ago. I met with Elie Wiesel in New York, and that was in the early 2000s. And I asked him about the rise of anti-Semitism in France. We had gone from a period where we counted less than 100 anti-Semitic acts in France a year to a new situation where we had several hundred of Jewish incidents reported to the police in France every year. And he said and reminded me that France was not an anti-Semitic country by its leadership, but there is anti-Semitism in France. But he said the most important question is, are the Jews afraid today in France? And this is the good question. This is a good question to know if the Jews believe they have a difficulty living in France because of anti-Semitism. So we have several types of anti-Semitism, of course, and but we do not have state anti-Semitism. Let me say that for many years now, for at least 20 and some years, the government has fought anti-Semitism. Yeah. Not that they have succeeded, because had we succeeded, we'd have much less anti-Semitic acts in the country. So the question is what triggers the rise of anti-Semitism, because when I said in the early 2000s, we went from less than 100 to several hundred, and last year for the first time after October 7, it rose to 1,600. So we went in the thousands, and it will not go down this year. It will still be in the thousands. So yes, there is an anti-Semitic question, and there are anti-Semitic acts. Question is very often asked to me, are you going with a kippah in the street? The answer is, in the street I walk in the areas I work in, I live in, there is no difficulty. It's in the center of Paris, in the west suburb of Boulogne, I have no problem walking in the street with a kippah. I go in the metro with a kippah, but the fact is, it has become more dangerous. And I understand the parents who tell their children today to wear off the kippah when they go in the street. I understand the people who take off their mezuzah to put it inside because they feel there is a danger. So the question is on the nature of the danger. And the nature of the danger, especially since October 7, is the utilization of October 7 and the situation in Gaza for political reasons. Mm-hmm. So Jews have become in France, for the first time for many years, a political object of debate in the local political life. To make it short and let you ask questions.
So when you say that October 7th, but that's changed, I mean, first of all, I was reading before, since October 7th, there's been a 70% increase in anti-Semitic incidents. So, I take that distinction that you made between state anti-Semitism and let's say public anti-Semitism, right? There's no question, like the president and lawmakers, for the most part, are all very vocal also when there are anti-Semitic incidents, calling them out. When there was the incident a week or two ago where that tragic story of a young girl who was raped by classmates of her, President Macron came out very clearly, called this a scourge of anti-Semitism in schools across France, needs to be dealt with. So very clear moral, what we would call moral clarity. However, we are starting to see that there are parties within the parliament, and in particular on the far left, the LFI, which I'm not going to try to pronounce how you say them in French, but their party got 28% of the vote in the first round of the parliamentary elections. Maybe I'm off by a bit, but they were second place after the National Rally Party of Le Pen. So they're high up in the numbers. I mean, this is a party that really has some serious, and I'm talking on the far left, before even the far right, some serious anti-Semitic comments and background there. I mean, that should be of major concern.
So several comments on on your question. First of all, it's not only the political elite of the country that fight anti-Semitism. It's the political, but also the civil society, also the religious leaders. Although since October 7, we have a problem with the Muslim community with whom we're not talking anymore. We used to have frequent contacts and we're not talking with them anymore. but it's also all the leaders, most of the leaders of the civil society who fight, who are on our side to fight anti-Semitism. Your comment on LFE, the left, extreme left organization, is important. First of all, they did not get 28%. You have to understand this is a coalition. On the day that the President Macron announced the election, they made an alliance between the left from the Socialist Party, the Green Party, and them. They made an alliance that obtained 28% at the election. So it's not a representation of the extreme left, although they're very vocal. And that is
it's the left bloc that got
the left bloc.
Right.
And I admit that they have made alliance with this extreme left party, who has been very vocal and very, they have expressed the hate of Israel from October 7, immediately from October 7, expressed and used the hate of Israel as a political object in their campaigns. And this is very important, and we'll come back to it. And the leader is Jean-Luc Mélenchon. He is, for many years, he is basically the French Corbyn, has done the same path from the left. He used to be to the extreme left and to the hate of Israel. So they have made together 28%. Now, from October 7, they've used, as I said, in the attack of Hamas against Israel as a political tool to gather what they believe the Muslim community around them by being anti-Israel, starting with refusing to call Hamas a terrorist organization. Some of them even went to call it a resistance organization, which is a very strong meaning in France, where resistance meant something of World War II. Calling Gaza, the death of civilians in Gaza a genocide, and taking all the arguments that could be the expression of hate of Israel as a political speech in their parties. And this is even most of their communication. To give you an example, last Sunday, we had the first round of the parliamentary election, and this leader of the extreme left, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, had on his side the girl who made the most of the campaign for the European election we had 2 weeks before, and wearing a keffiyeh, and she's pretending being a Palestinian and representing the Palestinians. She's never set foot in what she calls Palestine. She was born in Syria, but her parents were refugees. And by the way, she got the third generation refugee status, and she appeared with a keffiyeh, and every time she can, she is very heinous of Israel.
So that's on the far left, but then you also have the right. To talk us through, I mean, this delicate balance, right? Because the Le Pen party has obviously changed between what was once her father, what's now her. And it seems to me, if you can make some order there, that the issues with the party that's known as the National Rally Party are less concerning for the Jewish community than on the far left. Am I right in describing it that way?
Totally correct. Totally correct. And the issue is, we have always fought the Front National, the party of Jean-Marie Le Pen, the father of Marine Le Pen, because this is a party that was built 50 years ago by people who supported the Nazis, that supported the Vichy regime in France, and very openly, and they were very anti-Semitic and racist, and this is the origin of the party. So some Jews will tell us, yes, but they have changed. They have totally changed, and they're not the same party they used to be 50 years ago. And we have to believe on their tshuva. And the fact is, also, since October 7, they've made a strong point supporting Israel
Right.
and calling the attack of Hamas a terrorist attack and supporting Israel in all cases. We say, and when we say, it's very important to tell also your auditors that it's not only the leadership of the CRIF speaking. Let me make a short point on what the CRIF is. CRIF is, as you said, an umbrella organization. So it has a parliament of 300 people who elect a steering board. The steering board elects an executive committee, and the parliament elects the president for 3 years, 3 years. Our president, Yonatan Arfi, is now in the third year of his first term. But we have permanent discussions with permanent forum of discussion, and every time this discussion comes in front of the steering board, and every time we have people say, is it not time to start talking to the Rassemblement National, to have some bridges to talk to them and have some opportunities? They've supported Israel. And how can we not open the discussion with them? And the discussion is always very, very strong, but always comes to a general line of conduct, which is we are not supporting the Front National for many reasons. First of all, because the people who were at the Front National are still members of the Rassemblement National, which is a new party of Marine Le Pen, even though she wanted to make it more kosher than it used to be, but the same people are still there in the organization. That's number one. The second thing is they don't recognize their own anti-Semitism. When the leader of the Rassemblement National, Jordan Bardella, is asked about Jean-Marie Le Pen, who was condemned several times for anti-Semitism. Was he anti-Semite? So he says, I'm not sure, I can't answer this at different times. So he will not condemn the anti-Semitism of the origin of the party, and that makes it a difficult point for us to start talking to these people. But they're very strong to denounce the anti-Semitism from the extreme left. So they don't recognize their own anti-Semitism, they recognize the anti-Semitism from the other side, and this is important. What else? We have, and also their position are not in the values of the values we share, because as Jews we share the values of the Republic. We do not share the values of exclusion. And they have shared. They are close to the opinions and the prejudices of anti-Semitism. Every study that has been made on their electorate shows that the rate of anti-Semites among their voters is much higher than for other parties. And we have many examples of representatives of this party who have made obvious anti-Semite comment, and if not anti-Semites, it's exclusion, it's against the foreign population, against the minorities. So these are values we have we have a lot of difficulties sharing. And this is why we've expressed also that as long as we have not a strong condemnation of anti-Semitism, not that comes from the other side, but also comes from their own lines, we will fight against a group which does not share with us the Republican and Jewish values.
Robert, before I let you go, just one last question. I mean, when you look around Europe right now, especially in the aftermath of European parliamentary elections, you saw the rise of, the more populist far right parties, whether it was Le Pen, whether it would, what happened in Spain, what happened in Belgium. You're seeing in the Netherlands, other parties, and there are more local elections. But I mean, it's no secret that this is a trend around the world today, right? And sometimes definitely you were just talking about that you don't share those same values, and Jews, it seems, tend to look at the right wing. And by the way, I mean, we have a diaspora affairs minister in Israel, Amichai Shikli, who has publicly endorsed Marine Le Pen, right? Has
Right?
publicly endorsed Viktor Orban, has publicly endorsed other of these more right wing, members of parliament and politicians. So it all depends on how you look at things. But I think that there's obviously some concern that, like you were talking about the policies of exclusion, that today they go after the Muslims, they go after the immigrants, they go after, the migrants, but tomorrow all this could change. And I just wonder long term for French Jewry. You opened by talking about the 2,000-year history, the Rashi Day, Rashi being, the great commentator, one of the great Rishonim
The
from,
time of the Crusades. So was
yeah, but from France. I mean, it's such great, rich Jewish history there, obviously. And then you have Rabbi Moshe Sabag, who I read an interview with, the rabbi of the great synagogue, grand synagogue on Le Victory Street over there in France, in Paris, who says, I would recommend to young people to leave France today if they can get out, right? So what do you tell young people yourself? What does the Kreef tell people?
We tell them to, first of all, to fight for liberty, to fight for the republic. This is a sense of our message. In voting, you can fight. We'll see tomorrow what we have to say after the election, after a new government will be sworn in. But we hope, we want to keep, and the chief rabbi of France also shares the hope of better days, and the sharing of the values. The values of the French Republic are very important. Shown the way to the world, and we believe the French people are not ready to abandon these values. We share with them, and we've shared them with all the Republican parties, the central parties, even with some parties who have made alliance with the extreme left, but do not necessarily share the anti-Semitic values, and they have condemned the anti-Semitic stance of the LFI party. So there are a few people in France, and remember also about France, that France is a country where there were people who were giving Jews during World War II, but there is also one of the largest countries just among the nations, people who've protected Jews.
Right.
And therefore, it's not that simple to tell people just leave France now. First of all, it's not simple for families. Second, we want to fight, and we want to fight for the values we believe in, and the values we share with most of the French people. Right. When you talk about the extremes, and you were right when you started, Rassemblement National, the extreme right party, has made 30% of the vote, and the extreme left, if I take their result of the European election, they were at 7%. So we have 37% of French people voting. I'm not saying that they're extremists, but voting for extreme parties. That still makes 63% of French people not voting for extreme parties. And I think this is important, and these are the people we fight with.
Okay. Robert, I want to thank you very much for joining us, and Batzlacha, good luck to France, which, by the way, I mean, people tend to forget, but is a massive Jewish community, over 500,000 Jews who live there. And, I think one of the biggest Jewish communities outside of Israel today, after the United States.
The second largest community in the world after the United States.
Yeah.
And this is also a reason worth to fight for.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Robert.
It's an interesting fighting board, because we also have the largest Muslim community in the world, and we hope that in some time we'll be able to resume our discussions with the Muslim community and its leadership towards a better society to live in.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dov Maimon, it's great to have you back on the podcast. And of course, you got to be here because we're talking about the French elections and what's happening with French Jews. And as you wrote in the Times of Israel at the beginning of the week, who will protect France's Jews? Because the country, you wrote, may be heading toward an ungovernable future. And I just spoke with Robert Ejnes, who was just before on the before you on the podcast. And Robert spoke about this very delicate balance that they, I guess, as the Jewish leadership, have to walk between, on the one hand, not obviously coming out and being critical of different parties like LFI, whether it's the National Rally Party, but there is a complicated and complex reality today for the Jews of France. So why don't you give us your perspective on how you view this happening?
Yeah, I would like to take a distance of all that and just explain something which is important for people who don't live in Europe. I want to say that the rise of the far right in Europe is not occurring in a vacuum. France has encouraged mass migration from Muslim countries for over the past 60 years without adequately addressing social integration. And today, this immigrant population harbors significant resentment toward France and the Jews. As a result, we observe two distinct versions of France that never interact or understand each other, but instead stand in opposition. So we have a situation in France when we have two populations. And if we want to go further in sociological analysis, and it's important because it could happen also in America or other places in the world, the far right is not only, the polarization is appearing everywhere in the world because of a social gap increasing, but in France it's more than that. The population who are left behind of globalization. 20% of the population vote for Macron and for the central or Republican way. And we have 40% of the population who go for the far right, and something like 30% or 40% of the population go for the far left. And it's not exactly the same population. For the far right, its population come from the rural areas, people living in small towns, they have a French background. And the people who go for the far right is more people from Muslim background and far left. And these people want another society. We have the people of France, the old France, they feel insecurity at three levels. Insecurity at the personal level with violence, mostly from Muslim people, and have level, they have a social degree. They feel that they cannot give to the kids what they receive from their parents, and then insecurity at the cultural level. They feel France is not anymore France, it's looking like a multicultural country, maybe with much more Islam and so on. And these people go and they want to close themselves to go back to what happened. They want a welfare state. On the other side, the 40% or 30% of people go to the far left, where many Muslims living in the suburbs. These people also want a welfare state. They don't want a liberal state. And these people want a place when there are much more space for Islam. They want a multicultural, multi-ethnic. If I go further, Yaakov, I want to tell you what happened now. When we have a country with two different ethnic groups, we live one beside the other and don't meet one another, and these people don't have the same social worldview. They don't have the same worldview. They don't have the same life project. They don't have the same kind of society they want to build together. So we have a problem. What is the solution? We have one solution along history, which is imperial system with a strong power. This is what the far right is, like we have in China, in Russia, in the Ottoman Empire, along the history. And this is why we have so much interest in a far right. People want to have less freedom, but at least to have security and to say that there is a control. And the other side, the other solution is the Republican model. This is what was the Republic, the French Republic all the time, until 60 years ago. This model was a fact that you have integration. People go and become French, and they forget and they delete their previous identity, but it's not working anymore. It's a matter of critical mass and other things. So today we have two such situations, and if we don't do nothing, these situations could be a confrontation, and what Emmanuel Macron have called it a civil war. It could even go for violence. We hope that it will not.
So I understand. I mean, what you're explaining, Dov, is that this is not an Israeli or Jewish issue. This is a European issue. I totally get it. But the Jews often, as we know, are caught in the middle and are the ones who end up getting picked on by both of the extremes on both sides.
the story is very funny, but the anti-Semitism and Jews are really in the middle, is the core of the election that we have today. That's very fascinating. For the far left, because it's a lot of Muslim people, they want Sharia. 28% of all the Muslims in France want a Sharia state, Sharia for Europe. And 50% of the young people below 25 want a Sharia for Europe state. So it is a model, they want something which is completely different from the regular secularism that we have in France. And this issue, it's a lot of against the Jews, because the Jews are exactly because of social jealousy. They look at the people who have succeeded to integrate and to keep their own identity. And if you look at the demonstration of the left today in France and Europe, it's it's not anymore the red flag, it's the Palestinian flag, which we see everywhere in demonstration. So this is against, and when you have Palestinian flag, there is no room for the Jews. So the Jews have no place anymore in the left. And so it's a big problem for the Jews. So issue is very important for the left. The Jews are a critical issue, because when Mélenchon and the far left want to mobilize the people, especially to curb the Muslim vote, to these people go out of a social welfare state, state houses complex, and to go them to vote, they have to call for against the Jews, against the people who are cosmopolitan, the people who are succeeding, and so on. So this is very clear for the far left. On the other side, from the far right is coming from the Waffen SS, is coming from the Nazi time in the historically. So these people want to show that they are not anymore. They make change in the DNA, and they will make it. Yesterday we had a meeting with 30 leaders of president of Jewish community meeting with Marine Le Pen from the far right. And she told them, we are going to protect you against the kosher. You could have shrita. You could go with a kippah. We are not going to put. It's very important for her to be like in Italy, and not to be like Orban, or to be someone which is far right from a very strange country, to show that she protects the Jews. So the Jews are a critical issue, and the Jews are not only, the Muslims are 20 times more Muslim than Jews in France. It's only 1% of the population, 0.6% of the population. But the symbolic role of the Jews is very critical, and it's not good for the Jews.
What concerns you more, Dove? The far left or the far right, or both?
You know, I made a video on the French radio, Jewish radio, 2 days ago. After a few hours, it was 12,000 views. And they say that in the situation we have today, and I'm quoting what the hunter of Nazi, you know, Serge Klarsfeld has said, in the situation today, when we have a party who is pro-Israel and pro-Jews, like the far right in France, and the far left, which is against Israel, against the Jews, I have to say that I trust more on the short term the far right to protect the Jews who live in the suburbs. 70,000 Jews, or 70,000 Jews out of the 400,000 Jews live in a condominium with a lot of Muslims around. It's social welfare condominiums. 70,000 Jews are really living in hostile population. Someone to protect them, and we know that Macron is not going to protect them. We know that the Socialist Party is not protecting them, and far left is for sure not going to protect them. They're ready to sacrifice them to get the vote from the Muslims. So the far right, at least at the moment, at least for 1 year, maybe until the presidential election in May 2027, they will protect the Jews. They will do what they can. They cannot protect the Jews fully, because we have hawking, like happened with Sarah Halimi, or you have raping, like happened 2 weeks ago in Paris for a young girl. So you cannot avoid that, but at least they will try their best to show that they protect the Jews. Even in part of far right, a lot of people don't like the Jews, but at least they will protect the Jews for a lot of good and bad reasons.
Dove, just to wrap up, the Rabbi Moshe Sabag of the Grand Synagogue in Paris said that he would, if asked, he would tell young Jews, get out of France. They shouldn't, there's no future. I mean, do you think that there is, we in Israel will see a surge in immigration and aliyah to Israel as a result of this very complex situation that you're describing?
I'm speaking to you now. When I speak to the French Jewish media, I'm not speaking about Aliyah. Everybody knows in France who I am. I know that I'm the man who has written the plan for Aliyah for Netanyahu. So I solution Jew parents who want someone who want to be fully Jew. The model, if you go for the far right, we can have protection of the Jews, but it will be a private identity, like it was the pre-war model. I mean, it will be like with Orban. They will be protected on the level, at the personal level. It will be authoritarian. It's not good to be LGBT, nor Muslim, not Jews, but at least, and you have to be according to the government if it's far-right model, at least you are protected on the physical level. And you have just to decrease your Jewish file. And so there is a solution to live in France. Now, if you want to have a full Jewish life, if you want to be not only Jew at home, but you want also to be part of the big story of a big society, for sure, I think that Aliyah is a very good thing, but I don't believe that immigration is always a mix of push and pull factors. And Israel is not at the moment very attractive because it's very expensive. For people, I spoke about people who are living on welfare, and there's something like 40% of their budget is money from the government. So if I come to Israel, it will be very difficult. I've been 25 communities asking people say, Rabbi Dov, please take us to Israel. I say, don't come because we have no chance to survive in capitalist environment. I cannot tell the people. I'm not rabbi of La Victoire synagogue in Paris to tell the people, go. Maybe for young people, for sure, I can tell them come to Israel. But for people who live on welfare and have not so much money, it will be very difficult to call them to come to Israel unless we do some real program for immigration. I don't know if the state of Israel at the moment is doing that. We plan next week 2 meetings about Aliyah at the Knesset with Oded Forer, Chaver Knesset Oded Forer, one about protection of community and one about emergency Aliyah. It should be like an Ethiopian Jew, a full program, and we don't plan that Israel at the moment is ready to do that. For sure, if we have some dead people, if we have a big violence with riots, Israel will do such a thing. But
hopefully
I think
that won't happen.
In France, sorry?
I said, hopefully that will not happen. Right.
For sure, we expect it will not happen, and we try to tell the people all the time. It's already several months. I'll publish a book about it. I say all the people from the far right and far left on all the media in France are telling them, please care of the Jews, and they, at least the far right, I say we will care of the Jews. So it's important. Right. So it was important to say that to the leadership of the communities and to say that also to the other people. I'm sure I'm not the only one who say that, but it's very clear that if we have riots and civil war in France between the French France and the Muslim France, and it will be not good for the Jews. So we expect, so there is a future for Jews in France. I hope it will be at the short term, for sure, we have a future.
Yeah. Dov Maimon, thank you very much for joining us. And to all of our viewers and listeners, I want to thank you for being with us, wishing you a Shabbat Shalom. We'll be back on Monday and Thursday of next week. In the meantime, enjoy your weekend, and to